JohnStahl maintains an interactive approach to his candidacy for Congress, which he will continue to do as your representative for the 52nd Congressional District. He spends a lot of time attending meetings and other events with his future constituents. It is usually difficult to reach your congressional representative either in person or by telephone because they tend to be well insulated from you. By contrast, JohnStahl looks forward to meeting you and discussing the issues that are important to you.
We talked about you coming out to speak in Coronado.
Coronado?
Yeah,
all
you
right.
came up, and you have defenders out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, they like you.
I mean, we haven't even been a country for 1 trillion seconds, and this federal debt, every time I turn around, they're flipping it up another $1 trillion.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's unbelievable. Can you think about that? We haven't even been a country for 1 trillion seconds. How embarrassing is that?
You're going to take it.
I think so. Does anyone here not know why I'm running against Brian Bilbray? Do we need to spend time on that?
Why don't you just
Yeah.
give it?
If you don't, okay. Okay. So Brian's been an incumbent. He ran for Congress in 1996, won. He got beat in 2000 by Susan Davis. He became a registered lobbyist within 30 days. So he must have been on the phone as soon as the last poll he saw didn't look very good, and he tried to become a registered lobbyist. He would still be a registered lobbyist today if Duke Cunningham hadn't shot himself in the foot. So to me, when I ask people if you have keywords, what do you think about the term registered lobbyist? And I've never heard anyone say it's a positive term. You know, I wish we had more of them, right? It's not serving our country well. So I think we need fiscal conservatives who have private sector experience getting elected to Congress and solving these problems. I look at two types of people that are involved with government. You have bureaucrats who, in the mind of a bureaucrat, they want to spend somebody else's money, spend as much of it as they can so they can get more next year to spend more, and it's all other people's money. Milton Friedman talked about 4 ways that money gets spent. 3 of them are fairly benign. The 4th one is spending other people's money on other people. And when you're a bureaucrat, this baseline budgeting, everyone understand that term? I mean, when they talk about cuts, I was watching C-SPAN, I'm a big fan of C-SPAN, and these guys were sitting across from each other and thanking their distinguished colleague from the other party because they cut 3% off of something. Wrong, ladies and gentlemen, they were spending 4.5% more. The way baseline budgeting works, they assume, and they're going to get 7.5% more every year. If you know the rule of 72, something's going to double in less than 10 years under 7.5% growth. It quadruples in less than 20. Is there any reason why the Department of Education at the federal level spends $80 billion and wasn't even around in the 60s? So this is the kind of problem we want. I went to public high school on Long Island. We had great public high schools on Long Island. Garden City High School, we graduated 99% of the kids, most of them went into 4-year colleges, and it was that kind of a thing. The local PTAs, the parents, the county, they all worked together. It was a great school system. I don't know what's going on there today, but I'm not real happy with that. So we could look at these things. We could cut these bureaucracies. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution very clearly says powers not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states belong to the states and to the people respectively. So there's no constitutional authority. Now John Latcham, who was here earlier, is going to start teaching that Constitution class. So I can't go to every one because on Monday nights the Republicans have their meeting once a month and there are other events, but I'm going to go to as many as I can. So anyone else that wants to learn more about the Constitution, come there. So let's get back to Brian Bilbray. He's got some of the worst ratings. I mean, most people, when I went to school, how many people thought 65 or below was an F? I mean, when you went to school, wasn't that the case? Yeah. Okay, so if you were getting rated by the Heritage Foundation, your score was 52%. I guess I'd call that an F, I don't know. If the Citizens Against Government Waste looked at your voting record and gave you a 63, I would say, well, that's an F. You know, if the Club for Growth rated you 19th out of 19 in the state of California, of the Republican congressman, I would say that's an F, right? So here's the deal. Next to Francine Busby, he looks pretty good, right? So it's a dog with less fleas is what I would call it. But, and you know, when he ran in the special election in 2006, the Republican Party forced out a conservative who was going to challenge him. Well, they're not going to force this conservative out of this race. I was interviewed by the executive committee, and I started off my speech saying, look, I know what you're going to do. This is a whitewash. You're going to endorse Brian Bilbray next Monday night at your Republican meeting. But if I asked each of you individually if you were fiscal conservative and you were pro-life, you would all, 95%, say yes. But you're going to do what you do. Now here's the problem we've got. 85% of these congressional seats are already baked in. In San Diego, there's 5 congressional seats. 3 of them are definitely already safe. So if you wanted to help Darrell Issa or Duncan Hunter or the people who are going to help somebody take back that seat that Filner walked away from, you're just wasting your time. They're already crafted to be non-competitive. 65-35, 70-30, right? My feeling is that these seats should be mandated to be competitive. The gerrymandering should go the other way. They should be required by law to make them competitive, make them within 53-47. And that's the new districts that you have, so we have competitiveness. Nothing else in our capitalistic society says we want things to be non-competitive. Look at the healthcare problem. That's why we have problems. There's not enough competition. So let's talk about policy a little bit. My feeling is that my platform is very simple. Federal spending, jobs in the economy, leadership by example. Now I came up with my leadership by example criteria. 1, Congress should take pay cuts, 15%. How can we ask anyone else to take a 2% cut if we're not willing to take more? That's called leadership by example. 2, they should get rid of that staff. They've got 22 staffers in that office. Now, on the radio show, we were trying to get these debates going. I wanted to challenge Brian Bilbray to a debate. So we called the Solana Beach office, got the runaround. They told us we got to call Washington. So we called Washington on the show. Said, well, you got to call, this is the official office, you got to call the campaign office. Okay, what's that number? So then we got a hold of his consultant. Never one called back. Next week, same thing. I know Steve Dannon. Let's call and ask specifically for Steve Dannon. Say, well, Steve's not here right now. You know, you'll have to call such and such, right? So I made 5 phone calls over 2 weeks, never got a phone call back. Sent 3 emails, never got a reply back, right? In a private sector business, if I call your business, I expect you to say, I'm sorry he's not here today, but he will call you back within 24 hours or I will contact you and give you when he can get back to you. That's the way it should work, right? So this is very straightforward to me. So leadership by example, I'm throwing on top no insider trading. How many people think that would be a good idea, that congressmen shouldn't be allowed to do insider trading? If we can't find 535 people to serve the 200 million adults in this country that have enough character to say, I'm not going to do that. I know I'm sitting in there, I'm hearing about legislation that's coming down, and I'm above that. You should put your assets into a blind trust. So that's what we're going to do on the leadership by example. On the jobs in the economy, I called for us to get off of OPEC oil within 10 years. This country, the problem is, we talked earlier, hasn't had national goals for 30 years. We've only had 2 in the last half century. What organization, what team, what nonprofit does anything well if you don't have a goal, right? So John F. Kennedy wanted to put a man on the moon and bring him safely back to home during the 60s. I saw the end of that. I was tending bar on Long Island before I entered the Navy flight program. And on came the TV that said, hey, Neil Armstrong, a naval aviator, is about to walk down onto the surface of the moon. And I'm sitting here going, what a great country. I'm now going to enter that same flight program that this astronaut, the first man ever to walk on the surface of the moon, was part of. So that's got to be done, right? And then Ronald Reagan said we want to defeat the Soviet Union during the 1980s. We haven't had a national goal in the last 30 years. So I want to have 2 national goals if I get elected. 1, I want to balance this federal budget within 3 to 5 years. You know, we've got to do that. This autopilot, every plan I've heard, the federal debt goes to $23 trillion in the next 10 years. That's the best they can come up with? How many people were impressed with the results of the Super Congress? Right? So the regular guys decided, well, we want to punt. And we're going to have this Super Congress. And I remember Bilbray going on Mike Slater's show. I don't know how many of you heard that tape. But he was very flustered. Oh, don't worry, we're going to have Paul Ryan. He's our top gun. And he's going to go over there, and they're going to get it done. Well, wrong, right? It's just not working. So what they had to do, let's say we had a $46,000 budget in this group. And we said, boy, times are tough. We need to cut $1,200 this next year. Does anyone not think that we could find a way, 3 people could meet at Starbucks and figure out how to cut $1,200 out of $46,000 budget? That's the same analogy to what the Super Congress was asked to do, right? The country is going to spend $46 trillion in the next 10 years, was asked to find 1.2. They couldn't do it. Moody's told us if you don't cut $4 trillion, we're going to downgrade your debt. Why didn't they do it? In my mind, that says, okay, we should plan to cut between 6 and 8. And I'll compromise to 7, right? The compromise is not 0 or 1.2. We've got to do this stuff right. Now, when the GAO comes out with a report earlier last year and said there's $300 to $400 billion of outright redundancy and duplication of the federal government, when I hear we have 82 different federal job training programs, do you not think a group of us could sit down and say, look at all that redundancy. Why are all these competing agencies and departments creating their own thing? It's just not efficient. When I hear that we're still paying retail prices for prescription drugs under Medicare Part D, I'm wondering why. All you have to do is look at where these guys get their money. If I'm taking $100,000 from the pharmaceutical industry and I'm taking a trip somewhere to play golf with these guys or something like that, whose agenda do you think gets addressed? This job is to represent the people of this district. So what I'm going to do is hold a town hall meeting every month. I don't think Brian Bilbrey's had a town hall meeting in the last year. We're going to have one every month. You're going to know what the topic's going to be. Everyone's going to get a chance to come within 10 miles of their home once a quarter. So we're going to do that. So those are the kind of things that I want to work on. I need your help. This is not going to be easy. These entrenched incumbents have a lot of power in what they're doing. They get the franking privilege. Everyone know the franking privilege? $250,000 a year you're paying for those big envelopes that come in, House of Representatives, whatever. That's all being paid for. So it's a self-promoting scheme that the taxpayers are paying for, $250,000 each per year. So I've thought that should be cut down to 25. The original franking privilege was when Benjamin Franklin said a handwritten note from a congressman to a constituent to go out free of cost. And what they've done is they've blown it up through Dan Rostenkowski and all this other stuff into this $250,000 self-promoting scheme.
Be sure to come and meet John at an event near you and hear John Stahl every Monday afternoon from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock on KCEO AM 1000 and online at kceoradio.com. Check back here for additional archived programs at www.stahlforcongress.com, where you can watch John Stahl on the radio.